viewers, thank you very much. Welcome to Punchline Africa Television, broadcasting from the Command Center in Africa. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, watching us across the continent of Africa, in the United States of America, in New York, in the United Nations General Assembly. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are across the universe. Thank you very much for watching Punchline Africa Television. Today's show conducted by myself and Miriam as co-host this morning, and Tawish as the panelist in-house. We shall be looking at the Peace, International Peace Day. It's the day for peace. It's the day for making peace. How many people have peace in their hearts? How many people are looking for peace? Good morning, Miriam Ogutu from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you for holding the fort right in the headquarters. Thank you. God bless you. Let's see. Let's take it from there, Miriam.
All right, Doc, a very good morning to you there, and indeed good morning to Samuel Tawish, and a very good morning to our viewers. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where they're tuned in and watching us today.
Thank you very much, Miriam. We shall not waste much of the time. We shall go to the real tangible results. Good morning, Tawish, across the CBD of the Republic of Kenya. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Dr. David Masanga from Africa Command Headquarters. Good morning to Miriam Ogutu from our Communication Headquarters, and indeed to all our viewers watching the program in Kenya, Africa, and the rest of the world. My great pleasure to join you on this program this morning, Dr. Masanga.
Thank you very much, Tawish. It comes on a day that today America invited United States of the people, United States of America has invited Zimbabwe after 24 years of my struggle, Miriam, of saying remove sanctions. There was no need of targeting sanctions. There was a need to engage and contain Zimbabwe. We shall look at that containment, engagement policy. Should African countries be sanctioned, or should we just engage? Where has the spirit of engagement gone? Why is it that people in Africa are subjected to sanctions instead of discussing to find solutions? Have sanctions ever toppled governments in Africa, or sanctions only hurt people? From 1998, when Tony Blair declared sanctions against the people of Zimbabwe, isolated Zimbabwe, I've been at the forefront. I disagreed with Tony Blair openly publicly in the conference in Brighton. And I said, I am not a party to this type of sanctions against an African country. We should have engaged them. We should have contained them. Zimbabwe would have not gone to the spiral of where it has gone today. Ladies and gentlemen, those watching us, being a peace, a day for peace. Let's make peace. Let's come back to the topic of peace on the continent of Africa. How far, which way Africa? As we speak today, we see quite a lot of peace initiatives being initiated by various people on the continent of Africa. But has it borne fruits? Has it brought any fruits? Is there any conflict that we have been successfully neutralized and gone forever? 1991, Somalia went down to the dogs. Today, up to this age, in 1991, how many years are those? Almost 32 years to 33 years. Somalia is still under the cloud of insecurity. Where else have we achieved permanent peace? Where can we get peace? If you look at Sudan, which way peace? Which way Sudan? Which way Africa? Joining me on this show is none other than Miriam Ogutu, as I've said, and Samuel Tawish. Miriam, first of all, before we make our submissions, you can give us a bit of background. What stands out for you on International Peace Day, like today? You are celebrating peace. Are we peaceful? What is Peace Day? Thank you.
All right, Doc, thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. As you have rightfully put it there, today is the International Day for Peace, a day that has been set aside by the United Nations. And the 2022 theme is End Racism, Build Peace. 21st September is a day of celebration to recognize the efforts of all those who have continued to build a culture of peace. The United Nations invites every individual around the world to strive towards a world where harmony wins over hostility. And the UN General Assembly has declared this day as a day devoted to strengthening the ideals of peace through observing 24 hours of non-violence and ceasefire. All right, so all of us apparently have a collective responsibility to ensure that we observe peace, especially in the next 24 hours. It's dedicated to that, and then I don't know, after that we can go back to fighting, like what you see there in Ukraine, Doc. So I think it's very important, even as we have this conversation, to recognize a lot of countries, especially just starting here in Africa and areas that are really longing to have peace. So instead of it just being a day that reminds us about peace, what are we doing perhaps actively to ensure that we have a peaceful continent and a peaceful world?
First of all, I think we need, thank you very much. I don't know whether Tawish has something to say, but let me hear from Tawish, then I can come in. Tawish, Miriam has posed a question. What do we do on such a situation? What can we do that will bring about peace? What can peace be? How can we achieve? Are you going to be peaceful? Where does peace start from, Tawish, in your house?
Very well. Thank you so much, Dr. Masanga, and thank you, Miriam. Indeed, it's a very good question, that where does peace really has to begin? I think it has to begin with me. And this has always been the call, even from the immediate former president of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. He has always but reminded Kenyans that peace begins with you and I. And I think this is a good clarion call that puts everyone onto task to make sure that they do everything right within their ability to make sure that we sustain and maintain the peace that we continue to enjoy. One which has always remained an elusive component, not only in Kenya, but I think mostly in Africa and most parts of the nations in the world. But be that as it may, Dr. Masanga and Miriam, I think today, as we speak about the issue of peace in the world, and us as commemorating this very, very important day in our lives, turmoil today, insecurity, instability are still very evident in far too many African states, we should be very honest with ourselves. And I think then, Dr. Masanga, you're asking, what is it that we can do to be able to realize this elusive component and a very critical pillar of development in any nation? I think for the African continent, there's been a lot of criticism in terms of what has been their role in terms of making sure that the African continent and individual countries really remain peaceful, or even those that are going through turbulent times, that they can come back on track. And there's been a lot of argument about why the African continent, in many instances, has allowed, for example, maybe the international organs to usurp its powers. For example, the crisis that we saw in Libya in 2011, that saw, of course, the killing of Muammar Gaddafi. And consequently, therefore, we've never witnessed any sort of peace or semblance of sort in Libya. Because the African Union and the African people really were watching at the periphery. They were watching as though there was nothing they could be able to do to arrest that particular situation. So I think even at a moment when we are celebrating and commemorating this very special day, we must ask ourselves, what position are we in the global family? What is it that the African people and the African continent, through the African Union, can be able to do in terms of trying to restore its place on the security and the peace front? Dr. Masanga.
Thank you very much, Tawish. what can we do as Africans to restore peace, to have peace on the continent? You mentioned quite a number of countries. Let's look at the countries that are involved in war, in warfare. Let's start mentioning them. Miriam, Somalia, Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, Nigeria. Remember parts of Nigeria, top of Nigeria, Madiguri area, Kano, all those Sahel region, Cameroon, Ethiopia, as I have said. Have I said no? Ethiopia, yes. Look at those countries. Libya. Those are the countries that we are looking at as hotspots on the African continent. Chad. Those countries, all of them across the continent of Africa, they have trouble spots. They have the war. There's active war taking place in Somalia, active war taking place in Southern Sudan in several parts. The peace agreement there is fragile. The peace process comes in, goes out, enters through the window, goes through the ventilator. It is the Central African Republic. It is ever hammering, year in, year out. Ethiopia, it is now gone. The humanitarian catastrophe crisis continues to kill that country. Cameroon, the Amazonians, since they started an active rebel militant fight against the government in Yaoundé, the Amazonians have been fighting for their freedom. Nigeria, divided into almost several parts. The Biafrans agitating for a referendum and they want to break away from Nigeria completely. Peace is very elusive. Chad, we ended up the Chadian president being even killed on the front line. Libya is divided between Turkey and the other states that back up. Egypt is on the other side backing up a government in Benghazi, and the United Nations backing up a government in Tripoli. So Miriam, when you look, and Tawish, when you look at these trouble spots, what can Africa do? What can we do to make sure that peace returns as we sit in the United Nations General Assembly today? We are saying we declared this a peaceful day. Declaration of a peaceful day and a commemoration of a peaceful international day by UN. What does it serve to the people of Central African Republic who have never seen peace, who have never seen any light? What does it serve to the people of Tigray who are dying under blights and starvation, hunger, floods? Eritrea yesterday invaded Tigray, mobilized all the troops and surrounded Tigray, shelling and bombarding the area, all corners of Tigray. What can we do to change this perception that Africa is a place full of peacekeepers, not peace, full of peacekeepers, not full of peace? I think, Miriam, there's a difference there between peacekeepers and the peace. Peace, is there peace to keep in Sudan? Sure. Is there peace? What are some of the bottlenecks? Why is it that we don't achieve peace immediately? Why has the international community not mobilized resources the way it has mobilized resources between Russia and Ukraine? They have told us, taken a resolution to the United Nations General Assembly, and told us that we have got to condemn Russia for having invaded Ukraine. Why is it that we are, as Africans and African countries, African AU, did what we exactly did when President Joe Biden invited? And I want to take this opportunity. How do we achieve peace? Miriam, when Joe Biden invited African heads of state, several countries, and I want to thank Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, South Sudan, and the SADC countries, who said, if Zimbabwe head of state is not coming, we are not coming. This is the type of spirit that we can use to achieve peace. Remember, Miriam, yesterday we are talking about that countries have reached the point of being civil disobedience. If they invite you for dinner and your relative is not eating, just say, I'm not going to eat also. And that, you see, as a result, the pressure came on the United States of America to say, no, okay, fine. Let everybody come and let's engage. Let's come and engage and see what are the problems of Zimbabwe are. It is a policy that kept Africa under check. The wars in Africa were not many. We had military coups in Africa, but we did not have the type of strife, the crisis, the conflicts that we have had in Somalia, South Sudan, DRC, Congo, Central African Republic, Ethiopia, Cameroon, Chad, Libya, and Mozambique. If you look at what is happening in Mozambique, someone somewhere created this Cape Delgado was a peaceful country. What are the factors? What do you think are the factors? Let's discuss about the factors that bring disharmony, that disturb the peace on the African continent. Miriam, what do you think are the factors? The few that you can bring out, then we can summarize, and Tawish can also bring out some. What are those factors that actually disturb peace? And you can pick any case study on these two countries, so South Sudan, or anything that any of the countries, Somalia, what brought about the conflict in Somalia? Devolution. Look at devolution in Somalia. The US told in Somalia, Ziad Barre, that you must develop the state. It brought a conflict. What about in Europe? What can we, historical perspective, comparative history? Let's look at Europe. Yugoslavia was a united single state that had Serbia, Bosnians, Albanians, and other, nationalities. Christians, Muslims, all of them were living together. But when Yugoslavia broke down, Marshal Tito died, Yugoslavia broke to several states. That war in Europe has ended. And the people have rebuilt their lives. For us in Africa, in DRC Congo, in Central African Republic, now we have a new one in Ethiopia. We still have a very difficult situation to solve. Miriam.
All right, thank you so much. And indeed, those countries have been in a continual state of conflict. And you add to that, Burundi also, things are not very well in Burundi. Just the other day, the Prime Minister was fired because President Evariste Ndayishimiye felt there was some intelligence report that another coup perhaps was being planned. And we know, Burundi is very has had numerous coups before, and the country is very fragile as it is today. And a lot of factors, when you look at Burundi, when you look at some of those countries, Doc, that you've mentioned, some problems emanate from the colonial hangovers. Yesterday when we were having that conversation, I think one of the panelists mentioned that a lot of this disunity and conflicts we see across Africa, they are by design. Because some people out there, the external factors, have figured as long as we keep these Africans fighting within themselves to a state where they don't find the need to come together and think and do their own things as one strong continent, then we will continue advancing our agenda, we will continue talking, and we will continue running their affairs, because essentially that is what is happening. And just earlier on in our morning show, one of the news items I had was that speech by Senegalese President Macky Sall that he delivered at the United Nations General Assembly yesterday, and I was happy that he brought up the issue of Zimbabwe's sanctions, which are really very unnecessary at this point. So he spoke about that, but also he brought in the issue of some of the forgotten conflicts across Africa, and he was just calling on the international community to give and address conflicts in Africa in the same way they are addressing other conflicts across the world. And I think that also came out yesterday when we were having that conversation. But as much as it is easy to blame the external factors, which I think plays a huge role in the conflicts that we have seen intensify in this continent, because they are advancing their own interest, but we have to take up responsibility. So if you want to go to the United Nations General Assembly and say, let's pay attention to the conflict ongoing in Ethiopia. Let's talk about Central African Republic. Let's talk about Libya. While here in the continent, African Union has not given, agency to these matters, then how are we expecting those people to come and solve, and some of whom are the fomenters of these conflicts, to come again and try and find solutions for these things? So I think we must interrogate within ourselves as Africans and decide enough is enough. How can we find African solutions to our African problems, so that it's not just good on paper, what we keep saying there in the African Union, but it actually becomes a reality? And Doc, you said there, by saying when you were opening the show, it's good that we are commemorating this. It's good that we have set aside a day to talk about peace and bring peace to the attention of the world. But that is not enough. After 24 hours is over, then what? The people in Tigray, like you said, Eritrea already recruited by force all its young men in readiness to fight. The Tigrayans on the other side, and the Ethiopian government is still doing the same. Okay, so who is going to handle this matter? AU has insisted on the person they sent there for mediation, the former president for Nigeria. He's not done much as far as trying to bring the warring factions together. There's no head-on. There's no progress that is being made there. What could be the alternative? What else can we do as a continent to try to minimize the harm that is now looming there in Ethiopia? What can we do in South Sudan? They're making a bit of progress, and that is a good thing. So we should continue, I guess, putting pressure and just holding them to account. But what else can we do in the Democratic Republic of Congo? I feel like the rest of us have been set up. And yesterday when President the Democratic Republic of Congo's President Tshisekedi was speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, he's still insisting Rwanda is a problem. Why have we here, as the East African community, not sat down and say, okay, fine. So DRC has been accusing Rwanda for a long time. Can we sit down and look at some of these claims that the DRC is making? And Rwanda, you can bring in your position so that we are able to solve this matter before we even think about sending our troops there to engage in a very futile war and get ourselves into troubles that we don't even need. Countries like Kenya and the rest of us who are not directly involved in that war. So we are refusing to address the issue. Instead, we keep engaging in firefighting, and at the end of the day, we don't get to the root root of the problem. So as much as I really echo the sentiments of the African Union chairperson, Senegalese President Macky Sall, that the world has forgotten there's continuing conflicts in Africa and they don't get enough attention compared to what is the kind of attention Ukraine invasion has gotten, the kind of attention other conflicts have gotten across the world. But what are we doing as Africans to start with? What have we done that now we are unable to handle it ourselves and now we require outside help? There's nothing much we have done. Who talks about Libya? When is the last time we had a Libya agenda being presented at the African Union? When is the last time? When is the last time we addressed the issue of insecurity in Nigeria itself? When is the last time we talked about the conflict between the Cameroonian government and the Anglophones? When is the last time? When is the last time as the continent we sat down and said, we have these problems and now let's talk about this as far as the peace in this continent is concerned? So we have failed. Our leadership in this continent, AU in its collective, has failed this continent because you can't go in the international platform and try to hold other people accountable for the things that you cannot do, that you can easily address here. And then, so you address it. And if you get to a point where we can't handle it as a continent, and now we ask for outside help. But even the little that we can do within ourselves here, we are not doing. So this peace across these conflicts we've seen spread out in Africa will continue being elusive unless we decide within ourselves that we need peace, and not just commemorating a day for peace, but we need action and the way forward in solving some of these conflicts moving forward to achieve a more peaceful continent.
Thank you very much, Miriam. You have raised quite a number of issues: external factors, internal factors, firefighting, signs of the conflict. What have we done ourselves? 24 hours, we keep peace. After tomorrow, what next? What will happen? You have raised up very serious points. And those are the factors that we want to factor in and form what we call a peace. Like Emperor Augustus said, a Roman, a peace pact. How can we do? Africa looks like, out of the countries that you can carry 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 countries in Africa are under the spell of conflict. You have forgotten Angola is just fragile. South Africa itself is fragile. You can't have a sandwich in the restaurant in South Africa outside the veranda. Somebody will come. I was listening to the reports on South African television and radio, where they say the number of kidnapping for ransom in South Africa has increased, has shot up each day. There are over 500 people kidnapped across South Africa. So who is kidnapping these people? Where is the peace there? There's no peace. President Ramaphosa seems to be firefighting. The word you have used is to firefight, where Africa has never sent the fire. Instead, we have been fighting the fire. Nigeria, for example, before I bring in Tawish, look at Nigeria. There's trouble spots. Kidnapping is everywhere in Nigeria. Kidnap, executions, fragile situations. In Angola, it is politics. Is not normal. The opposition is threatening to go back and define and find a solution. They want to fight, which is very bad, because the government has not given the opposition what they want. They went to elections, they lost. Now they say, no, we lost badly. The Supreme Court did us a very bad injustice, a very terrible injustice, not even terrible. So here we are, Miriam. the peace. Those factors affect peace in the region. External factors. Someone will come and say, I want you to fight. Don't give, we shall give you all what you want. So internally, there are also factors that have caused a war. Wars like the one in Mozambique. Look at Mozambique. I had not mentioned Mozambique, country number 12, 13. Cape Delgado was very peaceful country, province. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of tourism. But what are the factors? Mm-hmm. External, Total oil. You see, the inequality created by Total oil created a problem.
And I think, the word there that you mentioned, I think that is the magic word, inequality. Because when yes. a people in a country feel like they're not treated equally and they're not allowed to flourish like the rest of the country, like the very good example that you brought in, the Cabo Delgado people, these multinational companies came up and set shops there. These people were displaced. Government did not take care of them. So other people are benefiting on our expense, at our expense. So it's easier to lure them to these other extremism activities. So I think inequalities, when you look at even conflicts that we cover here every day, the Biafrans wanting to have their own country, Amazonians wanting to have their own countries, and these other places that there are agitations to leave and secede, it is because of the inequalities that is being exhibited. So if a people feels disenfranchised and they feel like they are not treated equally, and there is a disproportionate way in which they even get resources, that is the biggest problem. So that word there, inequality, that is the main problem, I think, behind a lot of these conflicts internally, outside of the external factors.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Tawish, let's sum it up with you. Miriam has brought, lauded the inequality, and the amount of inequality that is caused, the amount of inequality in Mozambique, for example, created a war. In Cape Delgado, the war was created as a result of the inequality. Total oil went there and created a problem. That is the inequality that Africa is looking and seeking to change. So the peace cannot hold. The peace can only hold for one day, but peace cannot hold. Today is an International Peace Day. But what else in Africa can you talk about? How long will this peace be maintained? How many countries in Africa are peaceful? What can the leaders in the United Nations General Assembly, what can they ask for? Do we ask for these foreign companies not to come to Africa? Tawish, what do you think?
Thank you once more, Dr. and Miriam, for the contribution you've made. And I think asking Dr. as to what is it that we can do really to make a step forward in as far as peace and security is concerned in the continent of Africa. More important, Dr. we need really to stress on the people and the leadership in Africa to move from intention to proactive intervention. Because again, the challenge has been mostly that we are not really proactive in terms of how we are mitigating this kind of conflicts and the lack of peace and security in the continent of Africa. And therefore, as the continent's biggest organ that oversees all these activities, the AU then must invest in proactive prevention of conflict as opposed to reactive intervention. Although this is considerably more difficult really to achieve owing to various situations that individual countries really face in our continent today. Secondly, Dr. Masanga, I think just to avoid being repetitive and not to really mention what you yourself and Miriam have already spoken to, the issue of political intolerance and the suppression of the voice of dissent in the African continent has largely also been a prominent factor in as far as a prominent and contributing factor in as far as the major conflict we've been witnessing in our continent is concerned. This has in effect created an environment in which political debate and dissent are being smoothed, and in effect, therefore, it is making it very difficult for us to sow seeds of harmony in as far as resolving our conflict is concerned. Another issue, Dr. Masanga, which must be spoken about as a source of instability in our continent of Africa is the tendency of some of the leaders, if not all, really to continue clinging into power in perpetuity. I mean, these presidents we refer to as presidents for life have had a detrimental and devastating effect on many African states since independence. You can give examples of what we see, for example, in Equatorial Guinea, if I'm not wrong today. See, for example, in of course, in Uganda, as we speak today, in Cameroon, and so many of the examples that we have in the African continent today. The African leaders that now are being referred as presidents for life, the leaders who do not want even to vacate office. In itself, it has created a conflict between those who hold rather a contrary view or opinion. You've seen what Kenya has been able to do, really has been able to achieve, the strides it has made, tremendously so, on the democratic space, in terms of allowing smooth transition to be undertaken and the respect for the constitution of the land, which of course dictates every other aspect in terms of how governance is being carried out. And I think that is what has likely given Kenya or allowed Kenya really to experience the kind of peace and security, especially when it comes to politics, as it were. Dr. Masanga, there's also this question of AU not being very keen really on living up to the resolutions or to some of the treaties that it has signed itself to. For example, making sure that we have completely wiped out any factors or issues that have negated the efforts for us to be able to realize what we call now, quote unquote, elusive peace in the continent of Africa. So I think AU must now then work towards trying to prevent, resolve, and also eliminate all the destructive conflicts that continue to flare up on its watch. Because more often than not, we have seen the African Union, or rather the AU, really watching as though they are on the periphery, as though they do not have the teeth really to bite, as though they do not have anything they can be able to do, not until even the foreign agencies really appear to usurp the powers and the responsibilities and the roles of the African Union in an attempt to try and bring about peace, unity, and prosperity in the grand ambition of the African continent. So I think it's incumbent upon the African continent also and the leadership to see into it what they can be able to do to make sure that we mitigate all these kind of issues that are negating, of course, the call for peace in the African continent. And very lastly, Dr. Masanga, there's an issue to do with the human rights violation and abuses, the kind of humanitarian disasters that we continue to witness, the kind of genocide and how we can be able to prevent. Today in Cameroon, for example, look into the plea by Ambazonians to date. Nobody appears to be even giving an ear to what is happening in Ambazonia or Cameroon for that matter. The Central African Republic that you're speaking about, Dr. Masanga, Nigeria, the Boko Haram continue to have a field day in Nigeria today. Mozambique, to say but the least, Dr. Masanga. So we want to see the leaders, or our leaders today, ambitiously so try to commit really to bring about a paradigm shift and not to bequeath the burden of conflicts that we witness today to a generation that will take over from us, a generation that must really have something to thank the current generation, that there's something we really sacrifice in terms of restoring peace, stability, and security in our respective nations and generally in the African continent. I submit, Dr.
Very well. Okay, in case you're wondering, as Dr. Matanga there already has reminded us, today, the 21st of September, is a day of celebrating to recognize the efforts of all those who have and continue to build a culture of peace. The United Nations invites every individual around the globe to strive towards a world where harmony wins over hostility. And each year, the International Day of Peace is observed around the world, and the UN General Assembly has declared this day devoted to strengthening the ideals of peace through observing 24 hours of non-violence and ceasefire, but achieving true peace. entails much more than just laying down their arms. It requires the building of societies where all members feel they are equal and they can together flourish with the rest. So that is the basis of the conversation that we are having this morning. And this year's theme, according to the United Nations, is End Racism and Build Peace. Okay, that is what they are looking at today. But we also are looking at it from the context of Africa and what are some of the conflicts that we have and some of the problems and the challenges we have as far as achieving a peaceful continent is concerned, by laying out the examples of some of the countries and cases that we've been looking at there. Doctor, I don't know if you can hear me. Good morning.
Good morning, Miriam. Thank you very much. I think Tawish has brought quite a number of issues on top of the surface: human rights abuses, life presidency, also change of guard peacefully. You are lucky in Kenya, you change guards very peacefully. And you recently changed from His Excellency, Right Honorable His Excellency, the President, the former President Uhuru Kenyatta, to the current President, His Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto. You changed peacefully. In some countries, in Tanzania, for example, they changed when the late president died. There was a smooth transition in Africa. In Tanzania, we have changed peacefully in countries like countries. Ethiopia used to change peacefully. It is no longer. In Rwanda, we have changed from the legs to the mouth, or from the mouth to the legs. We change.
Don't change. There is consistency.
Yeah, there's a serious consistency of democracy.
Yes.
It does the type of democracy that we change every day. Does it bring you carry elections, but elections are not democracy. Democracy is different from elections. How many Africans know? How many Africans know what is democracy? The difference between democracy and elections. Everybody thinks that when you conduct elections, you are democratic, which is not. You can conduct elections under the Hitler type of elections, where everybody has, or Mussolini. Remember, Mussolini took a cock and took the, remember that guy was it Mussolini? Yes, who took the feathers of the cock while it was still alive. So we have quite a lot of difficulties on the continent of Africa, but despite all those difficulties, Miriam and Tawish, I think there is some sense of stability that is coming amongst the people to say enough is enough of war. People are looking at war as the last excuse. And I was listening to a clip from somebody from Kisumu who was saying that they are not happy. So you will listen to it. I don't know whether Miriam you have seen it, but I will send it to you if you haven't seen it. It's a 14-minute assessment. It is not peace. Is it when you are eating, you eat and go back to your house? One aspect that we have not looked at is economic peace. When you don't have economic peace, you can't have political peace. Inequality.
Yes.
Inequality. The point that Miriam raised, inequality in Mozambique created the war. So inequality in African countries looks like you give jobs to one place. The problem of South Sudan, the Dinka and the Nuer, they all fought on who should take the cake, because every position was given to the Dinka. That's what the Nuer Dr. Yakabacha were saying no. And the others say no, but this is us. So it will take time for Africa to find an equilibrium where we can balance peace. How does peace come? People in Tanzania, for example, are peaceful because they eat what they have. The sense you can see everything. The roads are being built. There is improvement. There is services are very efficient. Electricity blackouts are of the past. You can imagine, of the past. You go to places like South Africa, electricity. I think you must hurry to charge your phone. They call it shading. The new word is shading in those
Load
southern
shedding.
African parts. You go to Nigeria, you must have a lot of earphones or earbuds to put cotton in the ear. Why? The sound of generators. There are more generators in Nigeria which create more pollution with diesel. And yet Nigeria has 241 waterfalls which could generate, if the government just said these 5 years, we shall only build power for these areas, they could produce enough light for the whole Nigeria in the rural areas. There are people in Nigeria, for example, who still live like a stone-aged. You have seen some of them, Miriam, some of the pictures worry you. Then you say, is this Africa that we want? Which way Africa? So thank you very much for all those comments. Analysts, any of you has got a comment? Tawish, if you have any other additional thing you want to say before I make a takeaway. Tawish? No. Okay. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, just go ahead.
Today is an international day for peace. Peace is the basis of development. If there is no peace, you can't develop. If there is no peace of mind, no human being can be able to do a productive job which will add money to the economy of any country. Peace is therefore very important. But what kind of peace does Africa want? Does Africa want the peace just by paper, or does it want the real peace? Will Africa ever achieve the real peace? What are the factors that bring conflicts? First, we must check on those factors and say external and internal conflicts. The inequalities that we see among several countries in Africa. The plenty of inequality in several countries where the ones who have, the ones who don't have. It can upstage peace. It can bring about conflicts. So inequality is also a source. Distribution of national cake is a source of insecurity. How many countries in Africa therefore have seriously divided their cake, eaten it peacefully? Out of 54 countries, we have 14 countries under the radar of almost fragile and not fragile, but almost going there. We have the worst countries: Somalia, South Sudan, DRC Congo, Ethiopia now, Cameroon, Chad, Libya, Mozambique are some of the countries that are really in red alert. We need help. Africa needs help to remove this type of war and conflict that is in those countries. But what then can we do to make sure that it is not only 24 hours to observe peace? Why has UN set this day only for 24 hours, then tomorrow? Isn't it a factor which is negative? That when you tell people to observe peace for only 24 hours, and then tomorrow you start, it's a matter of saying, we have given up, we shall have to do it every 21st of September every year. Time has come for us to interrogate the external and internal factors. There are external countries that fuel conflict on the continent of Africa, and these external countries are well known. Time has come for us to name and shame them. They look for resources of this African continent. They take away what we have. They bring about competition. They bring about inequality amongst the citizens, where inequality is already deeper. We are digging a hole while we are in a hole. The external factors come and add on the hole that we are in already. They come and influence the internal factors, create friction, destroy the peace. Some of the countries that and the companies that have taken part are Total Oil, for example. Total Oil does engage itself in activities where it has gone. There has been a war. Look at Mozambique. It started going there. A war came in Mozambique. Companies that are doing mining, De Beers and others, they are not African companies. They find our own internal difficulties, but they come with external pressure. Turkey, for example, has petitioned Libya. It is controlling Tripoli. Egypt, for example, and the United Arab Emirates, they are controlling Benghazi, Libya. They have divided Libya into territories. In Ethiopia, for example, Tigray, who is supporting the Tigray and who is supporting the Ethiopian government, both external countries. Is this what we really want as Africans? Time has come for us to ask whether peace can be maintained by external influence coming to create more difficulties on internal factors. Time has come for people to say, we rather solve this problem. And how shall we solve them? By eradicating poverty, ignorance, and disease. Those are the three factors that have brought inequality on the continent of Africa. And as a result, added with corruption that is rampant on the continent of Africa, to the extent that we don't have enough resources to make sure that we know the signs of peace. We must create an academy that reads the signs of peace. Africa will remain fragile if we don't put peace above all the tenets of social, economic, and political life. Thank you very much for listening to us. On behalf of Punchline Africa Television, the Africa School of Thought, thank you.